Hello, everyone, and tonight is another very disturbing fanfic. It is by a dear friend by the name of Bronystories called 120 Days of Blueblood. It is a very long story, and I hope you all enjoy it. Chapter 1: The Dressmaker. And in the words of Friedrich Nietzsche's, hope is the worst of evils, for it prolongs the torment of man. If history will judge me a monster, then so be it. I will not live my life cowering in fear of a future generation's scorn. I am untouchable from derision or reprisal as long as I'm alive. I am for a prince. Even the mere mention of my name, Blueblood, sends a chill down the spine of even the most stalwart of stallions. The blood runs cold in every pony's heart when they hear the sounds of trumpets heralding my royal procession. By the right of my power, nothing is beyond my reach. My aunts control the sun and the moon, and I control everything that is touched by their light. In recent memory, there was one family who challenged my authority by refusing one of my demands, unlike the Canterlot unicorns, who all rightly fear me. This unicorn family hailed from the tiny province of Ponyville. Having come to the capital city, they were unaware of that all my desires were to be granted without question. I made sure they paid dearly for their ignorance. The parents have traveled here with their 2 children to paddle the custom-made clothing of their elder daughter and an enchanting young mare with a coat the color of cream. The flowing locks of her mane were royal purple. Her mother was also striking, with wide childbearing hips. The matriarch had a pink mane and shared her daughter's lovely mane color. I fully admit that the depths of my litigiousness knows no age limit, as I also lust after the youngest daughter. As with her sister, this filly's coat was pure white. The daughter's youth was confirmed by the fact that she was without a cutie mark. I summoned for the father, a white unicorn with a bushy mustache. He had a piece of mind to blow in my presence. The stallion asked what I desire of their humble merchant family. As I requested the company of his family and daughters to service me, I was even generous enough to offer to pay for the use of his wretched family. The foul stallion became indignant and refused. He slandered my name, a crime punishable by death in and of itself. The father rejoined the females, and without another word, his family, the clan disappeared from my presence into the marketplace to sell their goods in peace. Father's spurning of my offer only fueled my perverted lusts, knowing that one catches more flies with honey. I hatched a cunning plan to achieve my ends. I called for the most deadly assassin, Nightshade. He had witnessed the affront to my honor, and was eager to eke out his bloody vengeance on the whole family. My royal nightshade offered to slowly torture each member of the family to death. The father would watch helplessly as the three females were violently and abused one by one until they begged for the sweet release of oblivion. I admire his sense of poetic justice, but I rejected his method. After explaining the plan, Nightshade followed my instructions to the letter. He stalked Ponyville unicorns unseen as the evening drew nigh. The family found a room at the local inn. After paying for their quarters, the mother assisted her two daughters in taking their unsold wares to their room. In the first floor of the inn, there was a bar. The father stopped in for a drink. From there, it was simple. The assassin found a drunken vagrant at the bar and pitted him against the father. As the drunk attempted to start a brawl, a blinding flash of light was sent out by the merchant of death. In confusion, he assassinated the drunk in order to frame the father for the murder. Nightshade then blended back into the crowd before the bar patron's eyes had the time to recover. The first pony saw when their eyesight returned was the dead drunk with the father standing over his body. Cries of murder rang out through the inn. The royal guard was summoned and arrived almost immediately. This was due to my cleverness in stationing several guards near the inn. Upon hearing the commotion, the mother and daughters ran out just in time to witness their father being carried out in chains, flanked on either side by the royal guard. The body of the dead drunk was carried off to the morgue. The wife ran outside after her husband. He was carted off to the palace dungeons, swearing his innocence to the heavens. Feeling faint, the mother returned to the inn and begged to know where she could go to plead her husband's case. She swore on her life that her husband was a gentle soul, with a quiet temper. The mayor insisted that this tragedy was not the fault of her stallion. The daughters began to cry, also testifying of their father's character. Nightshade listened intently. The mayor grew desperate as the bar patrons knew not to get involved with strangers, lest they meet a similar fate. The three females, began sobbing over their patriarch's incarceration and the indifference of the citizens of Canterlot. At this point, my assassin stepped forward. He told the mother that I had the power to save any pony from the executioner's axe. She expressed her gratitude and asked how she might be granted an audience with me. Nightshade offered to take her there himself. He also encouraged the mother to take her two daughters along, as her presence might sway my decision. When my assassin delivered the three females onto me, I listened as they rambled on about their dawdling fowl of a father. They implored me to show mercy. I expressed to them that the crime of the murderer was capital offense. The wife swore that her husband had been framed. I asked if she was willing to make any sacrifices to save her husband. She handed me all the money they had selling clothes. She promised that in the morning they would sell their cart and other possessions as well to pay for his release. I laughed mirthlessly and threw the coin purse at her hooves. I told the wife that she could not simply buy her husband's life with mere money. The pink mare offered to be my servant. Her daughters chimed chimed in saying that they would also work in the palace to earn their father's freedom. I dismissed their offer, citing that I had many fine servants, and I had no need for more. The females began to cry. They begged to know the price of the stallion's life. They insisted that they would find a way to pay it, no matter what the cost. I told them that there was one thing I could free their father. The wife begged to know the answer. I told her that her husband's release hinged on me achieving release. The wife looked shocked. She cast her eyes to the ground, unable to look at me. I reasoned that one night of passion was certainly worth the life of her husband. The daughters protested individually, citing that their mother would never sully herself to break her marriage vows. The mare shouted for her children to be silent. In an impressive show of will, the mare raised her head and looked at me in the eyes. Tears stained her cheeks, but her eyes burned with righteous indignation. She agreed to lie with me that night in exchange for her husband's freedom. I haggled with her, reasoning that an old mare such as herself could not hope to satisfy me. She insisted she would be submissive to my every carnal desire. I told the wife that her position was acceptable. Once the deal had been made, I announced that my first desire was for her two daughters to join us. The mare cried for anything but that. She begged me to spare the innocent and preserve the purity of her daughters. I grew impatient with the mare and was prepared to cancel my whole arrangement when one of her daughters inverted. The elder one, the dressmaker, generously offered to service me. In addition to her mother, I would spare the younger sibling. I consented to this, provided the youngest be present in the room as we consummated the deed. With everlasting shame and embarrassment etched on their countenances, the mother agreed. I led the three females into my majestic bedchambers. Along the walls were huge paintings of ponies engaging in the most lurid of orgies. The mares averted their eyes, ashamed, while the little filly blushed and looked at all the epic illustrations. Her foal-like innocence ensured that of what was occurring in them. Below, a grand painting of a mare servicing 7 stallions at once. I had placed against the wall a fainting couch. I had directed the youngest daughter to sit down and enjoy the show. The mother moved in front of her young filly and expressed her love. She also expressed great sorrow for the fate of her family. Desiring an erotic display, I commanded the mother to begin licking the private parts of her young daughter. She protested, saying it went against our agreement to leave the youngest one unmolested. I hit the stupid bitch on the back of the head for her insolence. Her daughters were crying over their injured mother. I told the mare that I had agreed not to touch the child. I made no such promises for them. Levitating a candlestick over the mother, I threatened her by saying that if she didn't begin pleasuring the child with her mouth, then she would be required to shove this candlestick up her daughter's young ass. Horrified at the alternative, the mother began to gently kiss her young daughter's virgin lips. The royal member began to grow erect, sitting down beside the young foal. I put a hoof around her shoulder and played with her pale pink and purple mane. I asked the child what she thought of my paintings. She replied in a furtive tone she didn't understand. I explained to her that she and her mother and sister were fulfilling their highest purpose in life tonight. I told her that the commoner's solitary meaningful contribution to society was to provide pleasure to the royalty. The filly gave me a hesitant smile. The child squirmed due to the lurid kisses she was receiving. The filly asked if this sight pleased me. I replied that I was pleased and reassured that she would soon be reunited with her father. She smiled nervously as she tried to keep her head amidst a maelstrom of conflicting emotions with her young mind. The young child complained that her mother's touch was making her tummy feel funny. I snickered at her naivety. The mare sobbed silently as she continued to kiss her daughter's nethers. The elder sibling sat with her eyes closed, not wanting to witness the awful scene. I rubbed my shaft with my other hoof and summoned the dressmaker over. She knelt down beside her mother and looked up at me. Her eyes gravitated towards my swollen stallionhood. I asked her if she had ever filleted a stallion before. She blushed and confessed that she was still a virgin. I warned her that if she injured me in any way, then her incompetence would be the cause of the death of her entire family. I rest my left forehoof on her head as I guided my cock deeper down her throat. I pulled her head forward with my hoof, leading her lips towards the base of my shaft. Tears welled in the elder daughter's eyes as she choked while managing to suppress her gag reflex. Hearing the gurgling sounds of the young mare, the mother shifted her eyes to the right. She watched horrified as her elder daughter swallowed the entire length of my member. To increase my pleasure, I told the daughter to bob her head back and forth. I warned her again to mind her teeth, or she will live to regret it. While my stallionhood was being serviced, I focused my attention back on the mother and daughter. I have grown bored of the mild stimulation being given to the child. I told the mother that her daughter's lips had been kissed sufficiently. It was now time for her to use her tongue specifically. I wanted her to stick it inside her daughter's tender rose petals. The mother began to protest. I coldly reminded her that her husband's life was at stake. I warned the pink mare that if she objected to another demand, I would consider our deal as forfeit. She sadly compiled, pushing her fleshy mouth muscle past the foal's virgin lips. The little filly squirmed as her mother's tongue began the first thing to ever pass the folds of her tender vagina. She asked her mother to take her tongue out, complaining that it made her feel weird. Dismissing her daughter's pain pleas, the mother sobbed and continued her insertion. The mare was well aware that the price of the disobedience. The elder daughter was doing an excellent job to pleasure me. In spite of her insistence of being a virgin, I doubt her innocence. I remarked that the elder daughter sucked cock as good as the finest whores in the kingdom. I speculated that she must have swallowed the cum of many stallions in order for a family as poor as theirs to purchase the expensive materials used to make their pretty dresses. The white mare continued bobbing her head back and forth against my rock-hard shaft. She looked up at me with an expression which neither indicated guilt nor innocence regarding my accusations of previous whoredoms. Having been made sufficiently slick, I removed my stallionhood from the daughter's mouth. I commanded the mother to stop pleasuring the young filly's pussy. The mother was only too relieved to stop. She immediately removed her tongue and rested her head on the fainting couch, sobbing. The young child lay there panting, too young to comprehend these foreign sensations. Her mother's cunningness had left the filly merely confused. I instructed the youngest daughter to turn around that I might get a good view of her ass. She didn't want to. She called me mean and cried for her father. The mother was wise to silence her stupid daughter. She begged the little filly to obey my commands, assuring her that it would be all over soon. Once the filly was positioned, I could see her petite bottom. I instructed the mother to treat her daughter's ass as she had done with her pussy. I demanded to see her anal ring stretched by insertion of her mother's tongue. This request was almost too much for the mare. She soon acquiesced, approaching her baby's butt. The mother lamented the everlasting shame of it all and cursed her womb for bearing daughters who lived to experience such degrading depravity. She licked around the filly's pert asshole. The daughter couldn't help but giggle, saying that it tickled. I chuckled with a mirthless laugh as I mounted the mother. The mare let out a gasp of surprise, which I muffled by her daughter's behind choosing my target. I positioned my throbbing member next to the wife's unprepared asshole. I bucked my hips hard, driving myself deep with one thrust. Her dry ass began bleeding as the mother lifted her head, letting out an ear-piercing shriek. The scream startled the young filly, who voided her bladder all over the mother's face. The yellow liquid got into the mare's mouth and on her mane. As I repeatedly thrust violently into her hot ass, I added water sports humiliation as something I had not anticipated, but it was a welcome bonus to proceedings. The mare screamed for mercy, shouting that my tool was too large for her tight entrance. How I loved to see her such in sweet agony. Her rectal walls clenched tight around me as I pulled out. Her bloodied ring sent ripples of pleasure throughout my body. I commanded her to return her piss-soaked face to her daughter's asshole and continue servicing it. Desiring further stimulation, I summoned the elder daughter to take her place behind me. I complimented her on her exquisite tongue. I inquired if she was an adept at rim jobs as her dear mother. I ordered the dressmaker to stretch my asshole out with her tongue. The daughter complied sorrowfully. Her tongue poked itself into my ass. The feeling was glorious. I had not already promised to unite the dressmaker with her father. I would have gladly kept her as my own personal shit-licker. The elder daughter rocked her head back and forth with my hips as I continued to ream the mother's asshole. Blood from her gaping wound leaked down her thighs. I revealed in the scene, wishing the father could see his family now. We were a 4-pony train connecting by asses, tongues, and cock. As I continued my rear ruination, the mother's rectum stretched itself as an accommodate my girth. In time, her anal cavity became looser and less pleasurable for me, but more so for her. The buggering which she was receiving must have flipped a switch in the mind of the mare, as she soon began to lose herself to the pleasure. She let out a cardinal moan and began shaking her hips, trying to further stimulate her ass. The rim job she was giving grew more intense, almost as if she completely forgotten she was servicing her own daughter. The youngest child continued to be molested. She cried out for her mother to stop being so preserved, completely oblivious to the world around her except for her own pain and rising pleasure. The mother stuck her tongue deep inside her young daughter's anal passage and wiggled it around. The mare moaned with lust as her tongue penetrated the filly's small butthole over and over, stretching it out beyond its normal limits. The daughter screamed for her mother to stop, but the mare continued, undaunting. After a few more minutes of hard thrusting, the mare pulled her tongue from her daughter's loose ass and let out a loud moan of pleasure. She screamed her husband's name in ecstasy. My hind legs were suddenly sprayed with her feminine ejaculate. Even without any chloral stimulation, the wife had managed to climax from solely anal penetration. I was furious that the slutty bits had the audacity to come before a prince and stained my royal legs with her common mare juices. To compound the offense, the harlot had the nerve to imagine her husband as I screwed her ass. Not willingly to stand for such great insult, I removed my member from the whorish mare's terraria. The elder daughter's mouth becomes separate from my ass with a popping sound as I moved closer to the fainting couch. I was going to teach the trollop of a mother that my pleasure is what mattered. What she felt counted as naught. After spitting in the mother's mane, I set my eyes on the real prize. I craved I announced that I desired to deflower the youngest daughter's pussy and ass. The mother, who had enjoyed the bliss from her orgasm, was suddenly brought back to her harsh reality. She shielded me from the filly, saying that she would rather die before she let her daughter lose her virginity to the likes of me. The elder daughter whined and said that I was breaking the arrangement. I spat in her face and said the deal had changed when her whore of a mother had the gall to come before the royalty. I told the mayors to be grateful that I still was willing to release their father, provided the youngest was able to slake my carnal thirst. I told the mother that if I was not given the youngest daughter's virginity, I would have taken it by force and killed a whole stupid family when I was done. The three females broke down and sobbed. I ordered the mother to assist me in taking her daughter. The mare laid beside her, sobbing full on the fainting couch, and rested a hoof on her chest. Finally, the moment to deflower the young virgin had arrived. I was mad with anticipation. I called for the older daughter to resume her duties by giving my ass a proper tongue bath. Once the elder daughter's tongue had plunged itself back into the depths of my ass, I was ready to enter the filly's hot little cave. As the youngest child laid on her back, I buried myself within her in a single thrust. As my large stallionhood forced its way inside, the filly thrashed on the couch, screaming. The mother bawled her eyes out as she tried to hold her daughter still. Virgin blood ran down my thighs as the filly screamed pitifully. She was even tighter than her mother's asshole. Due to her young size, I was unable to fit more than a third of my cock into her before my cock head pressed against her underdeveloped womb. I made several small thrusts, further tearing her bleeding inner walls. My ass clenched around the dressmaker's tongue as she increased my pleasure tenfold. I praised the elder daughter for her skills, citing that if she were ever tired of dressmaking, she could make a fortune as a whore. Sensing my climax approaching, I pulled out of her bleeding vagina. I wanted to refrain from coming until I had sampled her other tight hole. The filly lay there sobbing as blood and my pre-cum leaked from her torn pussy. Commanded the mother to reposition her daughter and spread her young ass cheeks. Her hole might have received my stallionhood. The mother's tears dripped onto the filly's rear as she complied with my command. Fresh blood continued to run down the insides of the daughter's legs, staining her white coat red. Holding her daughter's tail out of the way, the mother begged that I finish quickly. I chid the grieving mare, telling her I would screw her daughter's ass for as long as I desire. I rammed my large cock into her tight hole. Her voice cracked as the filly let out an ear-piercing shriek that echoed off my tall bedroom halls. Her high-pitched screams and pains sounded like sweet music to my ears. The mother's rim job from earlier had ensured her anal passage would be better prepared to take my girth. The blood from her virgin flower also acted as wonderful lube. In spite of these considerations, my cock was still the largest thing I've to ever pass through her petite bottom. The daughter's ass tore and split as I reamed her raw. The filly wailed, complaining of the burning pain in her bottom, and begged me to pull out. She cried for her father to save her as she plumbed deeper into the depths. The mother stroked her daughter's hair and tried to comfort the hysterical filly. The mare assured that her the mare assured her that it would be all over soon and they would be able to reunite with their father. The mother promised that when this was all over, they would leave their home and never return to the wicked city ever again. The elder daughter continued to diddle my asshole. As my climax grew, I had difficulty controlling my bowels. Several rank farts escaped my rear, and the rancid aroma of my royal wafts filled the dressmaker's nose and mouth. She pulled her face away, gagging and reacting. I thrust forward to the hilt. The little filly's anal ring connected with the base of my tool. My family jewels slapped against her violated vagina as I came inside her. Thick ropes of royal refuge sprayed from my cockhead. I continued to pump her ass as I came, milking my orgasm for all it was worth. My princely semen filled her bowels as I screamed in ecstasy. As I removed my cock, it was covered in a mix of semen and the filly's blood and shit. I summoned the elder daughter to lick to I summoned the elder daughter over to lick my member clean. In spite of the revulsion on her face, she compiled. The dressmaker shuddered as she swallowed her sister's shit and blood, along with the trace amounts of my princely penile paste. My stallionhood was given a tongue bath. I looked over to the little filly. She was sobbing uncontrollably into her mother's lap as my royal seed began to leak from her gaping asshole and slid down to mingle with the blood encrusted on her torn vagina. The pink mare hugged her daughter close as the two of them wept. The mother expressed how proud she was of her brave little filly. The mare said that because of her daughter's courage, the life of her father would be spared. In her young body's effort, I expelled the semen. The filly gave a small fart, which sprayed my essence across the floor. I chuckled. When my member was clean, the elder daughter went to join the rest of her family on the couch. None of them dared to look at me. I assured the family that our arrangement was complete, that they would be indeed reunited with their father soon. I stood by the curtain-covered window and poured 3 glasses of wine for the females, and ordered them to come here and drink, that I might take the edge off their ordeal. They reluctantly trotted over and took the glasses. It was dawn outside. The small crowd had gathered to witness a public execution of the family's patriarch. He had been found guilty of murder and sentenced to die by the executioner's axe. His face was bloodied after having sustained a severe beating from the palace guards. During the night, his mustache was encrusted with blood from his broken nose. One of his eyes was bruised black to the point of being swollen shut. He had lost a couple of teeth, and blood sprayed from his mouth when he spoke. As the foal lay with his head on the chopping block, he repeatedly proclaimed his innocence and begged in the name of Celestia to be shown his family. The executioner had given strict instructions to delay the execution until my bedroom window was open. Once the 3 females have drunken their wine, I opened the window. The family stared at their father as the axe was raised. and the father's last words were a desperate plea to be able to look upon his family before dying. If the foal would have turned his head to the right, he would have seen them. The females watched helplessly as the executioner's axe fell with a sickening slice. The father's head tumbled off the chopping block and onto the basket. The two daughters shrieked, crying for their father. The mother stared at her husband's body. She didn't cry, as she already produced all tears she could muster. Staring at the still corpse of her lover, the mare felt dead inside. She whispered that he had lied to them. I replied with a smile that I had been completely honest in that they would soon be reunited with their husband and father. After a faint moan escaped her lips, the littlest child fell to the ground. The mares assumed that she had fainted from grief. In actuality, it was poison in the wine beginning to take effect. As the mother and daughter tried to rouse the dead filly, the poison started to take its toll on them as well. The two mares soon joined the rest of their family in the chilly embrace of death. My benevolence and compassion are nonpareil. Who besides me would be kind enough to administrate a quick-acting poison as their means of death? Before my eyes lay a pile of dead pony flesh, a mother and her two daughters. I summoned some of my burlier servants to dispose of the bodies. I let them know that the mother and older daughter still had some tight holes which have not been used. Should they desire them, the necrophiliac stallions eagerly dragged the three bodies from the chambers to have their wicked way with them. The father's head was placed on a pike as a warning to the others of my power. The only reason why the three females were spared such ignominy is because by the time my servants had finished fornicating with their bodies, even their heads were too mangled to be suitable for public display. Their mutilated, cum-filled carcasses were fed to the palace dogs. I stopped by the innkeeper's residence later that day and used the money from the mother's coin purse to buy an unsold dress that were still in their room. The shopkeeper gratefully accepted the money, as he didn't know what to do with the clothes after the family never returned for their possessions. Once I was back in my room, I displayed the dresses as a memento of my conquest. It's good to be prince.